Let's start by creating Next.js project. Open your VS Code and in your terminal, type npx create next app at latest. As I have already opened my VS Code inside a note app directory, I'll put period at the end. Go with the default option. Let's do some cleanup. Click on app directory and let's remove the default styles. Open page.js file. Remove this. Now, before diving into other concept, let's first understand about routing in Next.js. Next.js uses file-based routing. That means if you create a folder inside app directory and create a file named page.js inside it, then that route will be visible. Right now, we only have one page.js file at the root. So user can only navigate to the root or the home route. To create other route, we have to create new folder inside app directory. Let's create one for login page. Create a folder and name it login, as this will be our name for the route. Inside login, create a file name page.js. The file name must be page, otherwise it won't work. This is our login page. Similarly, let's do it for the register page. Let's run our app. This is our home page. Let's navigate to login page. Register page. So this is the basic of routing in Next.js. Now let's get back to the VS Code. Inside app directory, there is a file name layout.js. Right now, only the children prop is being passed here. That means if we are in the home route, then this children prop is replaced by page.js file, which is present inside our app. And if we navigate to login page, this children is replaced by page.js file that is inside login. Now we want to display header and footer in all of our page. So let's do that. For that, wrap children prop in main. Let's create a header and footer component. For that, in app directory, create folder name components. You can name it whatever you want. Inside components, create a file name header. Let's also create footer. Inside header, create a file name header.jsx. Let's also create CSS file for it, header.module.css. Similarly, in footer, Let's create simple component. Let's import it here. Let's place header above the main. And footer below the main. Let's add some CSS to our app. Open global.css file. Padding 0. Margin 0. Box sizing border box. Let's add some style in body tag. Display flex. Flex direction column. Gap 3 rem. And min will be of flex 1. Let's see our app. Refresh it. Let's set minimum height of body to be 100 VH. Right now, header is at the top, footer is at the bottom, and rest of the space is taken by the page.js file. If we navigate to the login route, we can see the login page. If we navigate to root page, we can see the home page. I don't want to waste your time typing HTML and CSS, so I'll add some HTML and CSS in our header and footer. I have added the necessary HTML and CSS that we need in our app. Let me walk you through the changes that I have done. Inside public directory, I have added two images. One is of header and another is logo of our app. In a layout.js file, I have imported the Poppins font and updated the metadata of our app. Inside footer component, I have imported style from the footer.module.css that we created earlier here. This is the basic HTML, and I have the styles in footer.module.css file, which I have used in this component. Similarly, in header, I have imported the logo and styles, and I want to display logo, so I have to import image from next image. Also, I have imported a link from next link. Now, when the user clicks on the image of the logo, they will be redirected to the home page. This is possible with the link tag. In login, I have added a simple form. It does nothing right now. In register, I have again added a simple form, but here I have used use state from React. So I have to add use client directive at the top of the file. I'm doing this because I want to check username, email, and password before I send it to the backend. We'll go through it later. So right now, don't worry about it. Let's see our app. This is the homepage of our app. If I click on login, I'll be navigated to the login route. This is our login page. And this is the register page. Now let's connect our MongoDB database. For that, let's first install Mongoose. In the root, create a folder named utils. You can name it whatever you want. And inside this, create a file name connectdb.js. Let's import Mongoose. Let me copy and paste some code. Here, we are initializing constant variable connection with empty object. Then we are exporting connect to DB function from this file, which is an async function. When the function is called for the first time, connection.isConnected is false. So we are creating new Mongoose connection. Then we are assigning connection.isConnected to the connection that we created just now. Now when the function is called again, connection.isConnected is true. So we'll be using the existing connection. If you are confused why we are using this approach, I suggest you to watch my previous videos where I have explained it in detail. Now let's create Mongo URI variable in our env file. Create .env file in root. Insert your MongoDB URI. I'll insert mine later. Now let's create model for the user. For that, create a folder named models in the root directory. Then create a file named usermodel.js. Let's import Mongoose. Let's create user schema. Our user schema will have username, email, and password. Username will be of type string. It is required. So required is true. Must provide a username. And the username must be unique. Let me copy and paste this for email. Email is of type string. Required is true. Must provide an email. And the email must be unique. Password is of type string. And required is true. Now let's export the user schema. Let's first assign it in user and then export it. Let's export it. Now let's implement NextAuth in our app. We'll be using the beta version. Open your terminal and install NextAuth. Now in the root, create a file named auth.config.js. We'll export our auth config from here. Now let's use the pages option to specify the route for custom sign in, sign out and error page. If we don't specify pages, then the default Next.js pages will be shown. So let's specify that. For sign in, we'll use our login route. And if there is error in NextAuth, we'll use our error route. Now let's protect our route with the help of authorize callback. It accepts auth parameter and request parameter. Now let's check whether the user is logged in or not. If the user is logged in, then is logged in is true, otherwise it is false. Now let's know the route path name that the user is trying to access. We can use next URL the path name to get the route that the user is trying to access. If the user is logged in, we'll execute the if block, otherwise we'll execute the else block. If the user is logged in and they are trying to access register or login route, we'll redirect them to the home page. Otherwise, they can navigate to all of our page. So we'll returning true. Now, if the user is not logged in, then user can only navigate to register and login route. So if they are in register or login route, we'll return true. Otherwise, we'll return false. Now add providers with an empty array for now. Close this. Also, we have to set up auth secret in our env file. Open the env file. And declare the auth secret. This will be used to hash the cookies. Now in the root, create a file name middleware.js. Let's import the NextAuth. Also, let's import the auth config. We created auth config just earlier. This is the auth config. Here we are initializing NextAuth with auth config object and exporting the auth property. Now let's use matcher option to specify that the middleware should run in all of our route. For that, let's navigate to Next.js documentation. Copy it and paste it here. Now in root, create a file name auth.js. Import NextAuth and auth config. Now let's export auth sign in and sign out from here. Auth sign in, sign out, which will be provided by the NextAuth. Now let's spread our auth config. Now let's specify the providers. We'll be using credentials. Import credentials. These credentials. From NextAuth plus providers plus credentials. Inside credential, we can use the authorize function to handle the authentication logic. Authorize. We'll get our credentials here as a parameter. It is an async function. For now, let's console log credentials. Then return null. We'll add other logic later. Now let's start working on the login functionality. You might be wondering why not start with the register process instead. But all the setup that we have done till now is for the login process. NextAuth does not provide anything for the register process. It does provide sign-in callback, but that would be useful if we have used providers like GitHub, Google. Since we are using the credential provider, we should handle it ourselves. So we'll do that later. Open the login page. We'll be using use form state hook from React to handle our form. Import it. copy and paste this. As we are using hook, we have to make this client component. So at the top, add use client directive. Just call it dispatch. Here we'll get the error message. Initially, the error message is undefined. Now we have to create function to authenticate the user. So let's do that first. In app, create a folder name, server actions. You can name it whatever you want. Inside here, create a file name, user action.js. Add use server directive at the top. Now let's create authenticate function to authenticate the user. Declare try catch statement. Let's import it here. Import authenticate from user action. Now when the form is submitted, we'll call the authenticate function. Let's authenticate here. And in action, add dispatch function. Now when the form is submitted, the dispatch will dispatch our authenticate function. In authenticate function, we get the previous state and the form data. Now we can use the sign in method to log in the user. Import sign in from the auth. We have exported it here. It is async operation. So add await here. We'll be using credentials and pass the form data here. Now, if there is error while signing in the user, and the error is instance of auth error, we'll use switch case. If the error occurred due to mismatching of the credential, we'll return invalid credentials. Otherwise, we'll return something went wrong. If the error is not instance of auth error, we'll throw the error. Let's import auth error. Now, when the form is submitted, dispatches the authenticate function. Now, the authenticate function will sign in the user by passing the form data. It calls the authorize function and we'll get the credential here. For now, I have console logged it. So let's try. Let's enter some random email. Password is also random. We can log in. Let's see our terminal. We got our credential. Now let's handle the authentication logic. Let me close other file. Inside try catch block, let's connect with our database. Connect to DB. Let's import the user model. Let's check if the email provided by the user is in our database or not. Await user dot find one. We'll use find one method. Email is equal to credentials dot email. Here, this is the credential, and we are accessing the email key. The user does not exist, then let's return null. If the user exists, we have to compare the password provided by the user with the password that we have in our database. Is correct. Let's compare the password. We'll be hashing the password, so let's install bcrypt to hash and compare the password. Npm install bcrypt, import bcrypt. The spelling is wrong. Let's use bcrypt compare method to compare the password provided by the user and the password that we have in our database. Compare credentials.password with the user password. Now, if the password is not correct, we'll return null. Otherwise, we'll return the user. If there is an error, let's console log it. And return null. So this is our authentication logic. We'll get the user credentials and we'll check whether the user exists or not in our database. If the user does not exist with that email, we'll return null. Else, we'll compare the password. If the password is correct, we'll return the user. If the password is incorrect, we'll return null. I already have some user in my database. We'll be using user with the username user and email user@gmail.com, whose password is also user, to verify whether or not we can log in into our app. Okay, now let's log in into our app. Email will be user@gmail.com and password is user. Click on login button. So you can see we are redirected to the home page. That means we have successfully logged in. This is the session token. If we remove this, we'll be logged out. Now let's also add some additional functionality in our login page. For now, let me remove this and let's go back to the login page. Right now, if I try to log in with the wrong credentials, I'm not getting any feedback message. So let's add that functionality. If the credential provided is wrong, we'll display error message here that states the provided credential is invalid. Let's go to the login page. Here we'll get error message in error message variable. Let's use it to display the error message. Let's display error message of the button. If there is error message, then display the error message. Let's try it out. Refresh the page. user@gmail.com. Let's provide the incorrect password. Click on login. So right now we are getting the invalid credentials. Now let's implement the register functionality in our app. For that, open the register page. Here, initially, the info variable is initialized with object with username, email, and password, which is a empty string. When the user inputs in the input field, we'll update the respective value. To do that, let's create this handle input function. Here, the value initially is set up with info.username, which is empty string. Similarly, for email and for password, whenever the value is changed, we are calling the handle input function, which we haven't declared yet. Let's do that. Function handle input. Create previous value and update e dot target dot name with value e dot target dot value. Let's console log it. Let's try it out. Add some value. Let's see our info. We are getting the entered value. Now let's handle submit functionality. For that, let's create function called handle submit. Missing function handle submit. Now when the form is submitted, Let's call the handle submit function. Now let's check if all the values are provided or not by the user. Info.username or info.email and info.password. If any of this is not provided, we'll provide feedback message to the user using feedback use state. Get feedback. And return the error message. Type will be error and message will be must provide all the credentials. Then we'll return from here. Now, if all the fields are provided, we'll set the pending state to true. Set pending to true. Declare a try catch block. In server action, let's create a function to register the user. Let's call it register user. We'll get info parameter. In try, let's connect with our database first. Let's get username, email and password from info. First, let's input it in our register page. Input register user and in try. Let's invoke the register user function. Await register user and pass the info that we have obtained from our user. Now, let's first check whether the user with the email already exists or not in our database. For that, we'll use find one method. Await user.findOne. Let's use OR operator as we have to verify whether the email or username exist in our database will not allow user with the same username and email. So let's use the OR operator. Let's check for email and username. For now, let's console log exist. And return. Log the error. Let's get back to our app. Refresh the page. Let's provide the user with the username user, which we already have in our database. Email can be anything. Click on register. See our terminal. User is not defined. Import user. Refresh. Let's try it again. User. Click on login. Register. Let's see our terminal. So the user already exists with the username user. This is working as expected. Now, if the user with that username or email already exists, we'll return error message. Username or email already registered. Now, if the username or email is unique, we'll ask the password and store the user in our database. Let's do that. Wait. We'll use bcrypt to ask the password. Yes, password. Now let's create the user in our database. After creating, we can simply return it. So we don't need this. Let's try it out with different username that we don't have in our database. Let's call it user2. user2@gmail.com. Password will be user. Click on register. Let's see our database. Refresh. we are getting some error. I didn't import the bcrypt. Let's try it again. User2 user2@gmail.com, user2 register. Let's check our terminal. So we have successfully registered user with username user2. Now let's fix this. Now we are returning error object if we have some error in our database or the user provided credential is invalid, like the username or the email exist. So if there is error object in our response, we'll update our error message, copy and paste. Type will be error and the message will be response.error. Else we can provide feedback to the user that the user is successfully registered. Type will be success. And message will be account successfully registered. Let's also add redirecting. Now let's redirect user to the login page after 1 second so that the user can see this feedback message for 1 second, or maybe make it 2 seconds. Let's do it for 2. After 2 seconds, we redirect the user to login page. Router.push. Let's input router first. Input use router from next navigation. Once router is equal to use router. Router.push to login page. And let's set the pending state to false. Set pending false. If there is error, we'll display something went wrong. And also set the pending state to false. Let's try it out. Let's provide username that already exists and provide different email. Just provide random password, click on register. We are getting error message. Now let's register user. We have username user3, email user3, and password user3. Let's first refresh the page. User3 at gmail.com. User, this should be here. User3. Password will be user3. Click on register. So account successfully created, and we are redirected to the login page. Let's log in with that credential. User3 at gmail.com. Password will be user3. So we have successfully implemented login and register functionality in our app.